Welcome back to Personal History. I'm your host, Matt Staley. For Halloween this year, we will go ahead and cover a few stories of the unexplained coming from rural West Virginia. Not necessarily ghost stories, but stories that lack a solid explanation. Hope you enjoy. So these are the stories of the unexplained that came down from my grandfather, Ben Ramsire. These took place when he was quite young in a house that his parents were renting back in the mountainsides in West Virginia. It was quite remote. It was a small 2-story house with a basement. They'd been warned when they went ahead and rented this home that there had been some unexplained activity, but they were not superstitious people and ended up kind of brushing that aside and going ahead and moving in. The first thing that they noticed, and they'd been told this had happened before, but nobody could come up with an explanation for it, is the basement would randomly fill up with water. They couldn't tie it to any rain, they couldn't tie it to any creeks or flooding or anything else that was occurring, and they would open up the basement and it would be filled with water, and they would come back a day later and it would be empty. There was probably a logical explanation for it, but nobody could determine what it was. And they didn't really consider it any big deal. They used it for some minor storage, but it wasn't a major problem with the home. The next thing that occurred was in the summer months, the upstairs would become so hot. This was in the days before air conditioning. And what would happen is the small rooms upstairs would basically be abandoned and the family would move into the first floor. This would allow the heat to rise up into the second floor and keep the ground floor a little bit cooler. With windows open and the heat rising to the second floor, it remained tolerable during the summer months. Well, during these summer months, one night, Ben's parents were laying in bed, and all of a sudden they started hearing noises in the abandoned upstairs. And it sounded like something was, at first it sounded like walking. And then it was one thump after another thump after another thump. And suddenly, they realized what it was. There was plaster on the walls and ceiling up there, and it was not unheard of during the summer months that the heat would cause some of it to come loose. And once one piece would fall, it would become a cascading effect and start dropping more and more pieces off the walls and the ceilings, and they were hitting the floor and making these thumping noises. They were very upset over this because this was going to require a lot of work to repair, and obviously they didn't even want to be up there in the first place during the summer months when it was so hot. But at least they knew what the mystery was. It was the sound of the falling pieces of plaster that would have to be repaired the next day. So they went ahead and went to sleep. The next morning, they got up, went ahead and went upstairs, opened the room directly above their bedroom, and there was nothing out of place. All the plaster was on the walls and on the ceilings. The doors were closed. The windows were closed. And there was even dust on the floor that hadn't been disturbed in weeks. There was still no explanation for what the sounds were, and they certainly found it strange, but it was a one-time event, and they brushed it off and went about their business. The third incident occurred a few months later. It was just a normal day. Their father had gone down and was working in his blacksmith shop. Their mother took Ben and his younger brother John, who at this point was still so young she was carrying him, and they went down into town to run some errands, did some shopping, and then walked back up to the mountainside to where this house was located. As they got close, as was the custom, Ben would usually run ahead, run in and open up the house and get the kitchen ready for them to drop off the groceries that she'd purchased and set some things up. So as they're approaching the house, Ben went ahead and ran in. He would have been about 4 years old at the time. And he ran through the front door, down the short hallway, and into the kitchen, at which point he was out of sight from his mother. His mother then heard him start screaming at the top of his lungs, just a long, unending, unwavering shriek. She went running in, grabbed his arm, looked at what he was seeing in the kitchen, and drug him out the front of the house, back down the side of the mountain, went and found their father at the blacksmith shop and told him that that was the last time she was ever setting foot in that house. Says Ben does not remember what he saw. He says he has no recollection of it whatsoever. But always said he had very vivid memories of it being the most frightened he'd ever been in his life, and that he just remembered feeling absolutely paralyzed and filled with fear. For the rest of her life, his mother refused to ever discuss what she saw in that house. But whatever it was, she was never willing to set foot in it again.